Okay. We good with the audio? Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you very much for showing up to our security series. Thank you, everybody in the room, for braving the weather out there. I don't even know what it's doing. But we're going to talk to you today about protecting your social networking profile. Just a little bit before we go in, we're going to talk about the security series that we started. This is the first talk of that security series. We have two other ones scheduled and listed here. One, a technical talk on mod security for web application filtering. And then another general session on defy hackers, buy with confidence, bank online with authority. And that's going to be a general talk. And we really want these talks to be what you guys want to hear about. So after this talk and after every other talk we have, we're going to put out a feedback survey that you'll get, and we encourage you to fill that out. Let us know some feedback about how we did on this talk, and then we'll have a section there that lists some categories and the ability to give you guys to let us know what you want to hear about. So with that, I just want to do a quick poll. For the people online, there will be a poll showing up shortly that will ask you what social media platforms do you use. And then for in the room, I'll go ahead and list, and if you can just give a show of hands of the ones that you use. So how many people in the room use Facebook? Pretty much everybody here, and we have 12 people. Twitter, 3. My poll disappeared. Yammer, I think, was the next one. Anybody use Yammer? One person. Google Plus, one person. All right, we have a very social network active person here. And then shout out any others you use, didn't list. LinkedIn. Go ahead. LinkedIn? Okay, we have a few using LinkedIn. Okay. And then how do you use your social media? Do you usually use it for personal, for professional, something here at Penn State, or both? Okay, mostly both here. So if we want to go ahead and see the results for the polls, sure. All right. So that was the second one there. So yeah, the majority of the people here were picking both for that one, and it looks like 62% are both as well. Actually, only 2 for professional. Nope. That's going down. So only 2 for professional, which is kind of surprising. Okay, we just wanted to do that to give an idea of how savvy our audience is for social media, and also to kind of where I can direct the talk as we go on. So just a quick disclaimer, and can I get rid of that hand raise? Okay. A quick disclaimer, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about here, I am a security professional, so I work for SOS, and so what I'll talk about here is a lot of things that's about the negative side of social media, but social media is great. It's something that we deal with every day, so keep using it. Just be aware of the pitfalls, be aware of some of the security issues that come up. We don't want to scare you off from using social media or social networking, but just be aware of what you're using, and I'll go over some of the pitfalls here and some ways that you can avoid them in the future. So what is social media? And this is a social media landscape, which basically I think it was done last year that lists a bunch of the social media units that are out there, and because a lot of these are startups, as quick as they arrive, they actually go away. In the middle, they have social platforms, which are the ones that actually combine the expressing, the networking, the sharing, and the gaming into one. And obviously, the big ones we mentioned earlier, Facebook, LinkedIn is a professional social media outlet, Twitter. We have Yammer presence here at Penn State. So I think most people know what social media is here, but this is just to give you an idea of the actual wide landscape that it covers. So Penn State's stance, we actually get this question a lot. What should you do for social media? What is the official Penn State stance? And this is obviously for university use. There's no official university policy for social media at Penn State. University Relations does have a set of guidelines that's on their website at socialmedia.psu.edu. And that covers some of the expectations and education for using social media as a representative of Penn State. And then if you have any questions about the actual social media for Penn State and communicating officially as Penn State, you can email the social media office at socialmediaoffice@psu.edu with any of your questions. So I'm going to go over 3 basic categories that cover security and privacy issues with social media. The first one being too much information, or TMI, password laziness, and being click happy. So TMI, too much information. Do you share every waking moment on social media? There's some people who, first thing when they get up in the morning, they're on their social media right before they go to bed. They're sharing every waking moment. Are you aware that anybody can read those messages depending on how your profile is set up? So anybody can go in there, see your pictures, see the posts that you have. Do you know that people are watching? A lot of things that people say to us is, why would anybody care? I posted I fed my cat this morning. Why would anybody care that I fed my cat? They might not care about that, but if you post, hey, I'm going on a trip, or hey, I'm going on a vacation to another country, they might actually care about that. And I have a story here of Wiggy107. And Wiggy107 is Harold Wigginbottom, who is a tech-savvy CEO with the company. And at the time, he was very vocal on Twitter with talking about a trip to Colombia he was embarking on. And some of his tweets, one of them, did I leave the front door unlocked, which maybe isn't something you want to post to Twitter, but he basically talks about going to the airport, giving very specific information, when he's leaving, when he's landing in Colombia. So when he arrives at Colombia, he writes, "Wheels down, Bogota airport kind of sketchy. Hooray, admin must have remembered. Car service, driver has assigned Wiggy107. So what do people think his next tweet's going to be? What was that? He's dead? Kidnapped? Well, actually, his next tweet is in Spanish. It says, "Do not worry, everything is okay. Please send a lot of money to this Western Union office." So actually, somebody was following his tweets, saw that he was arriving in Colombia, took, just like a limo driver, took a sign with his Twitter handle on it, stood at the airport. He thought that was his ride, so he got in the car and he was actually kidnapped. And actually, he came back afterwards with a tweet saying, "Thank God for kidnap insurance," because apparently his company had to use their kidnap insurance in order to free him. And he was successfully came back to the country and has not been as active on social media since. And so, this is obviously a big name CEO that some people might assume has a lot of money, but just think about when you're actually tweeting, talking about things like leaving home, going on trips that your house might be at risk. Things like that, just to keep in mind what you're actually putting out there. So geotagging. Everybody know what geotagging is? Basically, it's a concept where you actually insert the latitude and longitude into a file. And a lot of people will equate that to photography, where you can go out and you could take a bunch of pictures. You could come back and you can actually map them out where those pictures are, and a lot of times it's really convenient, but it's not just for photos. You can geotag videos, you can geotag messages, text messages, QR codes. You can also geotag your tweets, where you actually type a text and you can automatically say, "I'm here," so it'll know where you're at. It's actually really convenient for a lot of things. I use it for photography. When you go on trips, you could actually take a picture and then put that back on a map and know exactly where you took that picture. So it's rather convenient, but it always isn't convenient for social media. And how geotagging works. Yesterday I came here, I turned on geotagging on my phone, the location awareness service, and took a picture of the conference room. And this is the Ryder conference room, which we're doing this talk from. And there's a number of software that you can actually download, but there's actually a lot of websites that will give you what's called the EXIF information, and that's the data that's stored within that photograph. And so regex.info/exif.cgi is a site that you can upload a photo, or you can actually take a URL of a photo and plug it into there, and it will give you this information. And it'll list things like the camera, what lens setting you were at, the exposure, the flash, the date you took the photo. But it'll also give you, if you have location services turned on, the latitude and longitude of that photo. So if you take that information, and actually this page will do it, plug it in, it'll show you a nice map, and you can see where the green arrow is, but I put a bigger red arrow, is it puts us right smack dab in Ryder building. So it'll basically use the coordinates that your phone is collecting all the time, embed that into the picture, and then you can actually map that back. So an interesting experiment. Matt Honan from Wired did a little experiment, and he had an article that he put up called "An Experiment with the Location-Aware Lifestyle." And so he spotted somebody taking a picture with their iPhone at the Golden Gate Park, and basically went online to look and see if he could find this person's picture that they were taking, and then eventually come back and find them. And so he searched through some services and actually found them on Flickr, and actually went into their photo stream and could see that all the pictures that they had there were tagged. So he was able to determine where that woman lived based on a cluster of pictures that was actually on her Flickr account that revealed pictures of her apartment, the interior of apartment, a bedroom, a kitchen, a filthy living room, and now he knows where she lives. So just basically by looking at her taking a picture at Golden Gate Park, he was able to come back and find out where this person lives. Another issue with too much information, there's actually a Twitter handle called Need a Debit Card, and it will actually look on Twitter for people who post pictures of their debit and credit cards. And I have 3 selected here that show, it says, yes, new bank card arrived. Check out my bank card. And really the big thing is now that a lot of banks will allow you to take a picture and upload it to the bank, and then they'll send you a credit card with your specific picture on it. So people get really excited and want to show everybody their picture of them on their credit card or their kids on their credit card, and they'll post it to Twitter. And actually, if you look, it shows 191 tweets. This has been up there for a couple years, and actually it encourages people to take down those tweets. So they've actually posted a lot more than 191, but those tweets have actually been deleted by the users. So actually, it's an awareness campaign, and it says, please quit posting pictures of your debit cards, people. And so, and people just are unaware that somebody can take that card, and sometimes they'll cover up. They think if they cover up one set of the numbers that they're okay, but what people don't know is that the first sets of numbers can be looked up based on your bank. So if they cover up the first 4 based on the type of credit card you have, those could be easily acquired. So just something to be aware of when you think about how much information you post to social media. So what can you do? Obviously, the first thing, think before pressing send. Would you really want the whole world seeing this? You can't really, I have don't trust profile settings. While some of the tips I'll have here is to adjust your profile settings. You can't really trust those, as you know, for Facebook and Twitter and a lot of those, that they'll change and things that you might have closed before will actually be exposed again. So you really got to think that if this got out, would I want other people to see it? Adjust your profile to limit exposure. Check your privacy settings. Disable geocaching if you don't think that's necessary. Like I said, a lot of people actually find that convenient, but think about it when you're posting pictures. Limit who can see your posts, who can see your photos through your profile settings. And again, the last thing I list again, think before you press send. Once it's on the internet, it could be on there forever, and it's very hard to get off. We have a question? Right. The question was an older digital camera. Would those photos be geotagged? And typically, no. There's actually cards now that actually have geotagging built into the memory cards for newer cameras that you can put in. But typically, the older digital cameras don't have that unless it's specifically, specifically will say something like that. It's mostly, cell phones, camera phones, things like that. Yeah. Any other questions before we go on? No? Okay. So password laziness. And here I'm talking about password reuse. And it's not only an issue with social media, it's an issue all across technology. People will reuse passwords. They'll find a password that they like, and they'll use it everywhere. And why? Because it's easy to remember a single password. I know we're inundated every day with new computers, new setups, new accounts to log in, and having a password for each one of those that's different is really hard for people. And I'll go over some tips that'll help you out with that. But also what people do to get around policy is they'll actually add a character to the end. They'll add a 1, they'll add an exclamation point, they'll add an @ and actually, with the speed of computers we have out there, finding things like that compared to your regular password are really easy. So you're really not getting any extra security by doing that. So when people couple that password with a social media account, it could be a disaster for you or your company. And when I say that, there's been plenty of social media password leaks in the past few years. And here's a few of them. Last.fm, which is a popular online audio site, leaked passwords. Just a few weeks ago, Twitter had 250,000 accounts. I got an email saying, we've reset your password from Twitter. So they had people change their passwords. Yahoo Voices, 450,000 passwords leaked. eHarmony, LinkedIn had 6.5 million passwords leaked. The New York Times was infiltrated by Chinese hackers for 4 months. So probably any password that was used on that system was compromised. And people will actually collect these passwords. Security research will do studies on doing comparisons of what type of passwords are used, and I'll go into that a little bit. But these password breaches are typically posted to the internet. So you might wonder, who would reuse my password? And there was a Dropbox hack where a lot of people were getting spam from Dropbox, and they noticed this because they would set up an email account specifically for Dropbox and give that email account to nobody else. And they noticed they started getting some spam from that. And Dropbox noticed they had more reports of this and actually wanted to investigate it a little bit and found out that, and I have in the box here, that an unnamed Dropbox employee used the same password on an unspecified website as well as his Dropbox account. And that unspecified website got hacked and his password was exposed, and somebody was able to match that up and got some internal Dropbox documentation that had user email addresses in it, and then they used those email addresses for spam. So somebody actually used a breach on another site, matched up the password to this Dropbox user, and was able to pull this information out. So it does happen out there. So be aware, especially at Penn State. We see people, we have a lot of resources here. We have a lot of library resources. We have a lot of powerful email systems. We'll see people here want our accounts in order to use them maliciously to get access to those resources. So don't think it's uncommon for somebody to actually track you back based on something you have on social media to Penn State and try to use your password to get into the resources we have here. Some of those statistics I talked about earlier, people will use those to actually to model how passwords are used across systems. And last year, or 2 years ago, there was a big Sony hack. The PlayStation Network was hacked, and also Sony Pictures site was hacked. And this person actually took 2,000 of those accounts that had the same password and compared how many of those passwords were the same on each site. And it actually 92% of those passwords were the same on the Sony Pictures site and on the Sony PlayStation Network site. So they went a step further and took a separate password breach, which was the Gawker password breach that happened around the same time, and they compared the Sony hack with the Gawker password breach, and 88 of those accounts had the same email address, and 67% of those passwords were reused. So you might think with the Sony hack, maybe somebody said, well, this is all Sony, so I can just use the same password all across it. But Sony and Gawker are two different companies and two different means of two different applications, and 67% of those passwords were reused. So it is a pretty common thing to notice that people do reuse their passwords with social media or with accounts online. So what can you do for that? Use strong passwords that you can remember, just basic password security things. Change them often. Use a password manager. Anybody here familiar with the password manager? This is basically a vault that will keep all your passwords, and you can use one password to actually access all of those. You can actually add a second factor. Like I use LastPass personally. I keep all my passwords in LastPass. I'm able to actually generate a password through LastPass, a unique password for every site that I fill in. It's stored in that vault, and then I have a single very long password that I use for LastPass, and also I have a second factor key, which is called a YubiKey, that you can actually use, that somebody has to have that physical key in order to get into the account. You don't necessarily have to go that far, but using one of these password vaults will actually help you choose unique passwords for each site and help you keep track of those. So when you go to the site, you can pull out that password. And then if the password is breached, then that's a unique password that you're not using anywhere else. Another idea would be to categorize your passwords based on risk. So if you don't want to have a unique password for each one or use a password manager, one of the things you can do is based on risk, like maybe your bank, a lot of high risk information there. So you might want to use a unique password that's very strong. Medium risk, something that might just expose some general information. You might want to use a password, and maybe use that in multiple sites, but actually use it for something that doesn't have as high a risk of data. And then if you think about low risk, something that might not expose any information on you, maybe just logging into a blog to comment on something, you might be happy with reusing that password because it actually doesn't have any risk associated to it, to exposing any of your personal information. So those are just some ways that can help you from actually reusing your passwords. Any questions on that? I believe KeyPass is free. Like for my LastPass, in order to get the second factor, I think it's $12 a year. It's very low cost, but I think the basic package are typically free. Same with 1Password. They have different levels of packages that some are free, some cost money, and depending on what features you want, you might have to pay for them. The question was someone being super paranoid, and maybe you should come work at the security office, because we're usually the ones that are considered to be super paranoid. Is there any worry of having all your information in one place? And yes, there is that worry, and you almost have to look at it from a risk decision. When a few of us in our office actually went through and investigated how LastPass had things set up, and we decided that would be better than having passwords, not unique passwords, and having to remember passwords throughout. So it really is one of those risk decisions. And for me, for things like high risk things, I don't put in the LastPass. Like my Access account password isn't in LastPass. My banking account passwords aren't in LastPass. So you might want to use the last bullet point there to actually think about that when you're using it in a password. That those most sensitive passwords you might want to force yourself to remember, but the other ones you might be happy with using with Password Vault.
From Adobe Connect, what about Password Manager in Firefox?
I don't know specifically about that. You mean the one that's actually built into Firefox? I would say the one that's built in, I have seen that people have been able to access that because of the way that it's set up. I haven't done any specific research into that, but from what I've seen, these third-party services seem to be the ones that tend to have it together from the security standpoint. I have seen people able to get into around the encryption of things like Firefox and Internet Explorer password vaults and to read your passwords. I don't know if that's any better, but I know people have had better success with these third-party software. Any other questions? Okay.
Adobe Connect. To use the YubiKey, you must have LastPass Premium, $12 a year, and buy the YubiKey for $25. That's more of a comment.
Great. Yeah, and depending on how you use that, I feel that that's worth it. To me, the second factor actually gives me the peace of mind that somebody, at LastPass, if there would be a compromise, shouldn't be able to access my data, that they actually need that second factor. So it's really about risk, but these are just some ideas. I know that we're inundated with passwords, and being able to actually store them somewhere secure, a lot of people find useful. And thank you for that comment. The third thing, being click happy. Can you trust all the links that you see on social media? There's links, games, applications, flashing buttons, everything you can think of. A tweet that actually comes from your friend's account. Can you really trust that tweet came from their account? Can you trust that Facebook post actually was done by them? Is this app safe to install? I mean, it's on Facebook, so do you think that that's safe to install? You really got to think about these things before you click on those links or you install those apps. So malware spreads through social media. Malware is malicious software that people will use to gain, make a financial gain, to actually be able to control your computer in order to attack other people. I have some screenshots here of malware called KubeFace that actually spreads through social media. And how many people have received a tweet or a Facebook post that says, "Hey, look at this video. Hey, are you really in this video?" That one says, "Why do you look so stupid? See yourself." Trying to bait people to click on these links. Well, actually, these links that are in the shortened links, so they'll be like on the Bitly service, or now Twitter and Google have URL shorteners, because with things like Twitter, you only get 140 characters, so you don't want to take 40 of those characters with your big long URL. So they actually have services that'll shrink those, but you have no idea where those where those links are going. So with a lot of these, they'll use those URL shorteners and actually try to get you to click on that. And once you click on that, it'll affect your machine. It might affect your profile, where they'll get access to your contacts and actually send out, use this to propagate the same thing. As you can see from that Twitter screenshot, there's multiple different profiles sending out that link, and basically those profiles have been compromised with this piece of malware, and they're just spreading like a worm. So you really got to think before you click one of those links, do you trust the person that's sent from? Look at how it is, and with little short things like my home video, do you really think that's something that person would be sending? Maybe they've never posted a video on their Facebook account before. Why would they post this one now? So I'll go over some things later to help you out with that. Scam artists operate through social media. How many people have received this one where you have a friend that says they're stuck in a foreign country, and they lost all their money and their credit cards, or they were stolen, and they need some money to get out of that country. A lot of times hackers will use those same malware to hack into a social media or social networking site just to get access to your contacts to be able to send this out. And a lot of reports have actually been seeing that that elderly people, grandparents, have been struck by this because they don't quite know the technology, and they might get an email that says their granddaughter, grandson's in danger, and they obviously want to help them out, so they'll send money. Sometimes they'll have malicious links where they'll actually try to get you to click to be able to propagate that. We actually had one user who got one for a person down the hall, and they actually came to IT and said, "What should I do about this?" And the one thing we said is, "Did you go down the hall and check and see if this person was there?" And it turns out the person was there. They weren't stuck in a foreign country. But that's something you want to think about, is actually try to verify before you send click on a link or send any money to these type of people. So what can you do? Trust but verify. Like I said, if you can call this person up, if you have their number, be able to talk to them, even send them an email back, because if something in their Facebook got compromised, you might be able to send them a separate email. But verify if this is actually happening. Pay attention to spelling and grammar. You'll be surprised how many of these malwares, they're typically not native English-speaking people who are spreading this. So a lot of times you'll be able to pick up on spelling and grammar issues and know that, this looks a little weird, and you might want to do some more verification on that. Use a service or a site like long URL, please. I was talking a little bit earlier about those shortened links. Here's one for tiny URL. What that will do is take that shortened link and actually expand it to the big link without actually going to the site. So you'll be able to see where that's coming from. So if somebody sends you a YouTube video that you think is a YouTube video, and you click on it, or you put it into this long URL please site, and it comes back with some Russian site or some site that doesn't look like YouTube, you probably don't want to click on that. But actually, with this, you can actually see where you're going with that site. Some of them are even getting smart enough now to have a preview of the site where you're going. And this is available via URL. I know Firefox and Chrome have plugins for this that will automatically extend the tiny URLs to the large ones. So that might be something to look at when you see those short URLs. Keep your software updated. A lot of times the malware will propagate based on unpatched software, things like Java, Adobe Flash, Adobe PDF. If you don't keep those up to date, it's a ripe computer in order to spread this malware. So keep your software up to date. Run antivirus, anti-malware software. Unfortunately, antivirus studies have shown that it's only detecting between 25 and 30% of the active malware out there. That's just because this stuff is changing so fast. It's really tough for anybody to keep up. but it doesn't hurt to run it. It's available free through Penn State, through the downloads.its site. While it's not as effective, and we get a lot of people who ask us, I had my antivirus installed and it was up to date. Why did I get compromised, or why did I have this issue? It really is because it only collects or detects about 25 to 30%, and that's usually the stuff that has been out there for a while. So it's still is good to run it, but don't trust that as your only way to detect the malware. The question was, are Apple computers safer? And the answer to that is no, really. Any computer, any device can be compromised. For a long while, Apple has been kind of below the radar, because a lot of times we'll see that these malware writers and these people who want to make money will actually go for the most bang for the buck. So they'll, with Apple's market share previously being like around 10%, with Microsoft's market share being really high, they saw the bang for the buck would be to focus on attacking Microsoft machines. And now that the Apple the Apple market share is moving up, we're seeing more malware for Apple. We're seeing more issues for Apple. So it's not any safer. You still have to do these types of things. The unfortunate thing, and our senior director says, you probably will get compromised at some time. It's not because you've surfed to a bad site. It's not because you were looking at something you shouldn't be looking at. It's just because that's the state of the internet now. So I think that all modern operating systems, Mac OS, Microsoft has built in things to protect you a lot more, but you could be compromised on any device, Apple, Linux, mobile phones, anything like that. So there's really no absolute safe device out there unless you don't connect it to the internet. Yeah, and that's the comment was, since having an Apple, that they actually haven't installed any antivirus, and really for that, it's just one of those things of, do you want to get that extra 30%? As we said, antivirus has not been as effective as it once used to be, and that's because of the way things are changing. So it's really that risk decision if you want to install that. Some people don't do it because they think that something wouldn't be affected by that because they don't visit sites that don't have that. But really, we've had Penn State sites that have been compromised, that have been distributing malware. We've had plenty, Google, CNN, New York Times, all those have been distributing malware. So there's really no safe place to go. So it wouldn't hurt to install it if you choose. But we get a lot of people who think that's the only stopgap they have to do, and that by far isn't the only one. And like I was saying, think beyond typical computing devices. A lot of people think, when they think about malware, they think about their laptops and their desktops, but we have seen malware on Android phones. The iPhone seems to be a little better, but again, that's one of those technologies with a huge market share, and people are trying the best they can to infiltrate that as well. So think beyond just your laptops and your desktops.
We connect. What do you recommend for anti-malware software?
A lot of times, like now with the semantic endpoint protection that's available through PSU, it'll actually build in anti-malware, anti-spam. It'll build in a lot of that stuff. So now it doesn't necessarily have to be as much of a separate product. One of the ones that, it's been several years since I've used this, but Spybot, Adware, you can actually get plugins for browsers that will actually block ads and malware. So, but usually just the semantic endpoint protection will couple a lot of those together. Any other? the question is, sometimes the antivirus can look legitimate. The software could look legitimate, but actually that is the malware itself. So how can you trust what you're clicking? And it's really a verified source. Like if you go to downloads, you type downloads.its.psu.edu into your browser and you download that antivirus software, you know that you're getting the semantic software that we put up there. And really where we see a lot of those issues with kind of like the fake AV things are people will get a piece of malware installed on their machine, and it'll actually cause it to bring up windows that say you're infected. You need to install this thing, or you need to buy this thing in order to get uninstalled. So things like that from an untrusted site you wouldn't want to install. But if you would pick the Penn State one, that's going to be safe. Is there any other questions? Just some overall social media security. Important things: set the appropriate privacy controls. There's privacyrights.org has a whole section on social networking privacy. It goes through a lot of things, talking about how to set up profiles if you're looking for a job or if you're a student or things like that. Gives you a lot of good tips. For Facebook, Secure State has a white paper on a Facebook privacy guide. And it'll actually go through all the settings and tell you which settings to set. Those things change a lot, so they update this site rather routinely. And that's a good place for Facebook to actually find out which settings do what and which ones you should set. Another thing, be cautious of third-party applications. Think about when you're going to install these. Is this something that you really need to be installed? Can you trust where it comes from? And not only after you install it and use it, when you're finished, go through and see what things have access to your profile, see what applications you still have installed, and anything you don't use, uninstall those. Limit your personal information to begin with. Like we said, what happens on the internet stays on the internet. If you put it up there at one time, there's no guarantee that you could actually ever get it off. So if you limit what you put on there in the first place, then it actually can't be leaked or read by another person. Choose your connections wisely. There's been lots of scams out there where people will create fake profiles thinking that they're connecting with this real famous person or something like that, and it turns out actually being somebody just acting like that person. Twitter has actually started to introduce some controls to actually have a Twitter verified person. So if somebody really famous comes on the Twitter, they'll actually go through and verify that that is that person. So think about who you choose as connections and choose those wisely, because the person might not be actually who you think they are. And have separate accounts for personal and professional. I didn't really go into it too much, but I'm sure you all have heard that there's been plenty of court cases out there where people will get terminated from employment or passed over for jobs because their employer will go and search for them on the internet, and they'll find their Facebook profile with them, drinking somewhere or doing something that maybe that company wouldn't like one of their employees to be doing. There's actually been cases where some employers will ask for your social media passwords so they can go and see what you're doing. A lot of states have actually been outlawing that. But, this company, if they think they're going to invest a lot of money into hiring you, that they want to make sure that it's worth their time. So a lot of companies do search the internet for you and find out, some of the things that you do and post on social media could easily show up for them and could affect you getting a job or staying employed depending on where you work.
Questions on Adobe Connect. The one is, if my computer becomes infected, what should I do?
Okay. Well, for if it's a Penn State computer, talk to your IT staff they can help you out there. If it's a personal computer, the best thing, if you're capable of basically reinstalling that whole machine, you'll actually get a CD when you buy your computer. I guess now it might be a partition on a drive to reinstall that computer completely, back up your data, reinstall it, and put your data back on there. Or if you can't do that, there's local places around town. There's Best Buy. There's places you can take it that will actually do that for you.
Are the security software on ITS downloads available for mobile devices?
I don't believe there are any mobile device ones there. Typically, I think there are some available for both iPhones and Android, but they would have to be purchased individually. I don't think that there's anything for mobile there. The question is there anything on ITS downloads to help with the Linux-based distributions? I don't think I don't believe Symantec works on the Linux side that we provide. There are some other free ones. I don't think they're directly available on ITS downloads, but that's something we can actually look into and see if there's a Linux-based version of Symantec. But I don't believe so. Any other questions? And finally, just to wrap up, use common sense. One thing you might want to think about, would you want your mom or dad or your spouse or your children to actually see what you're about to post onto social media? So really think about that. I mean, there's always been times, kind of think about when you're going to send an email out and you might be enraged at something and you type up that email and you kind of put it aside for a little bit and see if you calm down. You might want to think about doing that before posting to social media, because once it's out there, you can't pull it back in. So just use common sense and think about the things that you post. So with that, I'll take any other questions that you have, either in Connect Land or in person. Okay.
Question: what suggestions do you have for good, strong passwords?
For good, there's actually a few sites, and we could actually link to them and send those links out through the email that will actually allow you to test your passwords. There's plenty of sites that will generate a secure password for you. We could send those links out. There's actually a page that will go through and tell you, like, building a password that you might think 14 random characters would be more secure than 5 words taped, together one after another. It's actually a really good, interesting site that tells you about building passwords that completely random might not be the best. Sometimes if you recommend your favorite song lyric that is, a bunch of words strapped together might be a better password. So we can put those links and send those out afterwards, and they should help you with choosing passwords. And also on the ITS site, its.ph.edu, there's a password guide that talks about choosing passwords specifically for Penn State applications. Okay, the question is opinion on the security of Google email accounts or Yahoo email accounts. Just like anything else, when we think about them from a Penn State perspective, we think about things like where it's located. We know with our Penn State email that it's located in a computer building, and if we would need to retrieve that for whatever reason, we can do that. Where we lose that with Google or Yahoo is that we don't necessarily know where that's located. A lot of people ask us, is it okay to forward my Penn State email to Yahoo or Gmail? We don't recommend it. There's nothing stopping you from actually doing that. But in our recent events of last November, we think about being able to get that data back if we need to, if it's actually a Penn State account of an employee. And if that's on another server, then we actually have to get documentation, usually court documentation, to get that data back. So we don't recommend that you do that for your Penn State employee email. But the services themselves are just as safe as anything else. It really relies around some of the things that you do with your password. Things like Google have gotten really good at saying, hey, this random IP has logged in that I haven't seen you log in from before, and it'll display a banner at the top of your Gmail. And sometimes that will tell you that somebody else accessed your email. You'll want to change your password. So they are getting good at security. They're very good at spam filtering. So there's really no security issue with using those. It just really relies a lot on the user and how they have their security settings set up, what type of password they have. Any other questions? Oh. Right. The question is commenting about sites that actually have you augment your password with different questions like mother's maiden name and things like that. We actually could say a lot of time it depends on the use, because a lot of times those are used for password reset. So if you forget your password, they might want to know your email address and the answer to your security questions. If it's actually used to log in, there might actually be some added security, because if somebody would need into your account, they not only need your password, but they might need the answer to your question. Unfortunately, a lot of times with social media, people have actually posted, I've seen them on Facebook, like top 20 polls where they'll ask you to fill out information about you, and those are typically things that are used for password resets, used for getting credit with your social security number. So really for those, depending on how they're used, they can be useful. But a lot of times if it's information that's publicly available that you might post on your profile, they're really of no use. I know that we use them at Penn State, or started using them to aid in the password resetting. So if you can answer a set of questions, you would be able to reset your password. Okay. One last call for questions. No? All right. Well, we thank you very much for showing up. We're actually very pleased with the numbers, attendance-wise, and from the registration. We're really looking forward to continuing this series. We have the 3 scheduled now, and we'll have more scheduled in the future. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you, feedback on how we're doing, feedback on some topics that you guys want to hear. And we look forward to doing these for you. So thank you very much. Okay. You can